What's going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the California Underground Podcast. I am your host, Phil. Along with me, as always, is my trusty co host, the best and fastest researcher in the West, Camille. And tonight, we are very honored to have our first presidential candidate on the episode or on the show, Dr. Michael Rectenwald, who is running as a libertarian. Michael, welcome to the show. How are you tonight?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Absolutely. So obviously running as a libertarian, you're not up on stage with the big stars on CBS and stuff like that. So why don't you tell people and introduce yourself to the audience, who you are, where you came from?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Michael Rectenwald, and I am the former NYU professor who took on the woke mob for free speech. I'm also an ex-Marxist turned radical libertarian. I'm the author of 12 books, including Google Archipelago, Beyond Woke, Thought Criminal, and The Great Reset and the Struggle for Liberty, amongst others, of course. And I'm running for president as a libertarian. And I have been endorsed by major figures in the libertarian movement like Dave Smith and Judge Napolitano and Walter Block and Jeff Deist, former president of the Mises Institute, and a host of other people. And
Mhm.
my website, just so I get this out there for the campaign, is rectheregime.com. That's REC, theregime.com.
So I think people would be curious to know, how does a former Marxist go from one end of the spectrum all the way over to a diehard libertarian who's now running for president? How does that transformation even happen to someone? Was it you picked up Murray Rothbard's Anatomy of the State, or was it something else?
It's not that simple. It isn't about, the research came later, but it really had to do with the it was kind of a trauma that I sustained at the hands of the woke mobsters, and
Mm,
the they opened up my eyes to see exactly what they represent, and I soon saw them as the totalitarians, they wannabes that they are, and and then I started into an entirely different. I had a kind of gestalt shift, and it was in within hours really of seeing what I was looking at that I became a civil libertarian, and that is somebody
mhm,
believes in individual rights as primary, and then did some started into research and reading deeply, and also reading about the history of I knew about the history of leftist political criminality, but I went into a deep dive in that, and at the same time exploring the libertarian tradition through Ludwig von Mises first, and then Rothbard, and then Hoppe. That's Hans Hermann Hoppe, and many others. And so I, and all these last five books I've written have all been from a libertarian perspective. And I started into a new life phase from being a tenured, a full professor at NYU to becoming what I call an intellectual entrepreneur, and that is living by my wits and
mm.
writing and producing material that people actually want to read, and unlike academic research and writing, which garners very few readers. So I reached a much wider audience. Um, my story at NYU became national news, and I was soon on all kinds of TV shows and stuff like that, and have been on them since. But that sort of propelled me into the media sphere, and then I should say that I really recognized that the left that I had been associating with was I really was misplaced there in the first place. I really
Mm.
didn't belong, and because I had always kind of suppressed or repressed various thoughts that I'd had that you just aren't allowed to think, and that are verboten. They're sort of potential thought crimes. In fact, I
Mm,
was having those thoughts, and I recognized at one point uh, that if I expressed what I was thinking as an NYU professor, all hell would break loose. And
mm.
indeed, it did.
Yeah, it's I went to law school
Mm-hmm.
uh sort of around the start of the Trump years, and law schools are notoriously left leaning anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say Trump just made everybody member go out of their mind to the point where when I was president of the Federal Society at our school, which is a nonpartisan organization, although they say they're mostly libertarian, um,
Mm-hmm.
people couldn't stand that I had scheduled someone from the fire organization, which just wanted to talk about free speech on
Mm-hmm.
campus.
Mm-hmm.
And people on campus were calling for my head saying, "How dare someone actually have someone like this on campus? We can't allow people like this on campus. What are they going to talk about? What are they going to tell our students?" When it's literally just someone coming in and saying, "Here's your rights on campus. Here's how your free speech is protected. If you have any issues, we're a nonprofit organization."
Mm-hmm.
So it is pretty incredible how far down the rabbit hole or down this path academia has become, where they pretend that they're all about constructive discourse or
Mm-hmm.
constructive dialogue, but they really
Mm-hmm.
aren't. It's more like you can argue in this little sandbox, and that's it. But if you're
Mm-hmm.
there and you believe
Yeah.
something different, we're going to ostracize you and make you feel like you're not welcome and you should be, kicked out of school. Is that sort? Am I
Yeah.
like on the
Yeah.
right path?
I mean, they have the Overton window is very skewed and very narrow, and when you go outside of it, you're going to find what you didn't realize was there all that time, and that is you're going to hit a third rail, and then you will see what shock you create and what shock it'll create for yourself. And that's
Hmm.
exactly what happened to me. I had no idea what was in store when I made some of the statements that I made, and they were very censorious and very unaccommodating. That's to put it mildly. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, it's quite an experience. But that it for me, it unleashed a whole a new era of creativity. I just exploded with writing and essays and speeches and stuff like that. So it was very liberating when
Hmm.
I renounced the whole left at one in one fell swoop, renounced Marxism, renounced the whole, you know, establishment. Really, it is the establishment. That's the interest. That's the other thing. We're
Hmm.
talking about the establishment itself. So the political establishment is a leftist totalitarian establishment.
Right. Yeah, I watched you on Tim Pool just recently,
Mm-hmm.
and you had mentioned about how we need elites to sort of decouple. And I don't know if you can see it. I'm wearing my "The Elites Hate You" sweatshirt. So regarding the elites and how they control this country. Um,
Yeah, I call
so
them the
running for
subversive elites. Yeah,
yeah,
subversive elites. Yeah.
subversive elites. That's a good way to put it. But they certainly the elites don't like us, and they definitely want to do everything they can to control us. But
Mm-hmm.
running for president as a libertarian,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you hear a lot of the criticism. I get it as well when if I bring a libertarian on or something, they say, "Oh, they don't have any chance to win. Why do you care?"
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Explain to the listeners why it's so important that there is a libertarian president candidate out there on the trail talking about stuff.
Well, somebody has to represent liberty in a principled fashion, and that's where the libertarian candidate comes into play. The thing about libertarianism, if, it is if you hold the view, it is the most principled position out there, and it gives you a guide stone for treating any kinds of issues that come up, and you have you're not just swaying with public opinion, trying to test the waters with different views. You're actually making a principled stand on all these issues of the day, and this is very this is very important for the American public and any particular nation state population to hear. They need to know what it is that liberty is. They need to know what liberty is and why it's the most essential property that human beings have, and why, in fact, it has to be defended. So, while we may not win the election, and I'm not deluded enough to think that listen, I want to win, but I'd like to win the lottery too. Uh, but but winning, we have to redefine it in terms of creating more libertarians,
Hmm.
producing, getting. It's a 50-state media tour,
Hmm.
and it is also a an opportunity to reach the public in a way that they won't be reached by these uh, you know equivocating and uh, rather compromised politicians that are on the stage.
Hmm.
I'm not a politician at all. I never had any political ambition whatsoever. I was asked to run by the Mises Caucus of the Mises Caucus of the Libertarian Party, and I have spoken for spoken for them at various events, and I'm a big believer in their vision, and so they asked me to basically be the spokesperson for that vision, and that's why I accepted it. And I'm running on a campaign of decentralization, localization, wresting power from the federal government and vesting it in the people at the local level. And
Hmm.
that's the message. We're not talking about some white knight riding into D.C. and fixing everything like every other candidate is promising. In fact, most of the libertarian candidates are promising that. I think I'm the only candidate in the entire race, including all the other parties, that's not promising things that can't be done. And I don't think that this system can be reformed or fixed or even overthrown from the top down. It has to be done from the bottom up.
That's actually a perfect segue because that was going to be my next talking point in my next topic. I read your essay about two nations,
The
and
two nations.
we've I mean we've talked about it on our podcast, not nearly as eloquently as you've put it in your essay. And I urge any of my listeners go to my com, check it out. It's a great essay. Um,
Thank you.
you dive into sort of the difference between globalism versus localism.
Yeah.
And we've talked about on this program, especially regarding California. California is an enormous state, 40 million people, 58 counties. I mean, the thing could be run like its own country, like its own
Mhm.
mini United States. And when you talk about the difference between San Diego County and Butte County or Inyo County, I mean, they're vastly different with different peoples and heritages and culture. And to think that Sacramento can rule over all 58 of these counties that are so diverse,
Yeah,
you kind of step back and go, well, this is ludicrous. Like,
it is.
there should be more power in the county. And I think we saw a little bit of that in COVID, where people started to wake up and go, what are my county supervisors doing? Why are they instituting these COVID mandates? Or we had a mayor here in San Diego County, Bill Wells of El Cajon, who said, look, I'm not listening to Gavin Newsom. I'm not going to send the police to enforce any of these business lockdowns. If any of these businesses want to stay open, I'm not going to be the one to punish them. And that sort of local protection is a great example of how localism can push back on centralized power.
Hmm.
Um, could you talk a little bit about that and sort of this idea of localism and bringing the power back to localities?
Yeah, that's right. And COVID is a great example of why why this is necessary. In fact, because to drive their agenda, whether the statist, globalist, whatever you want to call them, they need to drive their agenda into the fabric of society at the local level for their policies and imperatives to succeed. And likewise, if these things can be resisted at the local and individual level, then their policies fail, and their draconian measures, as under COVID, fail. So that's why localism is so important. So the idea is that now it's important to put people in place in local offices that are supportive of and fighting for freedom, and that are trying to resist centralized control on unconstitutional laws and mandates, and are nullifying them by virtue of the 10th Amendment, frankly. And so that's it's necessary. So even at the local level, I will say there is a lot of I think I just saw an article in the New Yorker, which I don't really often read, but somebody pointed it out to me. And it was about how there really isn't that great of a difference between the rural communities and the cities, the urban centers, in the sense that in both places there's the status, every bit as compliant and complicit with the state, federal state, as as in the urban centers. So that's why it's important to get the right people into these positions, so that look, they're trying to drive Agenda 2030 and Agenda 21 into the local communities to have uh, the kind of policies that these globalists would have us adopted at the local level. So we need to have people in there that resist these things, and that vote against them, that vote to nullify, and
Mhm.
to, as your mayor did, simply to refuse the dictates that they're dishing out, and to
Mhm.
be aware of what the agenda is that they're trying to resist too. So that's all very important.
Speaking of California, we're, a very blue state here where they're constantly screaming at us equity and equality. And I saw you were a guest on Don't Tread on Anyone podcast with Keith Knight, and you paraphrased a quote from Will Durant: equality is the enemy of liberty. I loved that. Will you
Mm,
expand on that a little bit for our audience?
sure. So equality and liberty are very, there's a great deal of tension between them, the two, and because when you enforce equality, you basically have to curtail the liberty of people, especially those who would achieve more, who would own more, who would, especially when you're talking about what they call equity. Equity is the production of equal outcomes for people, regardless of anything. And when they're trying to force equity on you, uh, it curtails the liberty of people, because you have to squelch people. You have to squash them in order to create equality. It's kind of like the novel by Kurt Vonnegut, Harrison Bergeson, and where they, in this novel, they effectively, if somebody has too high of an IQ, they provide, send brain, waves into their brain to disrupt their thinking, or they reduce their height or something like that. So this all cuts against individuality, and of course liberty itself, because you have to restrain some people, and even in the case of the Soviet Union, you had to kill them in order to attain this so-called equality. So equality and liberty, and also democracy, democracy and liberty are it's very fraught with tension, because a majority might vote to rob you of your property, which is exactly what democracy does. In many cases, you get people on the voter rolls who decide that your wealth is not earned, or that you don't deserve it, or that you shouldn't have it, or that you have too much. And so they vote to rob you of it. So this is why democracy and liberty are also somewhat antithetical, actually.
Going back to the localism
Hmm.
issue, you had finished your point about electing people into these local positions, and it's so important. Um, During COVID, I remember getting a lot of messages through social media, and people said, what can we do? What can we do? And you gave them the answer, which is you have to get people in these local positions, whether it's school board, city council,
Mm-hmm.
county supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's so crucial. And I think people, thankfully, are starting to see that and see that these positions do make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of your goal as a presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party is also to help lift those candidates up as well in the
Mm-hmm.
local positions. Is that correct
Yeah,
in your
that's
mind?
right. We're trying to promote people to run and to help them run and to enable them to wrest power from the central government by getting in office and by getting the state, the federal state off of our backs. And so, yeah, we're trying to encourage that because this is where the rubber meets the road. So, yeah, indeed, the campaign is about that. So, being successful will be, that's why I say the campaign is really not just a campaign. It's a movement. It's a
Mhm.
movement to usher in this decentralized revolution, as we call it.
As exciting, and one of the most exciting pieces of news was Lily Wu winning Wichita out in Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
We actually brought it up on the show. Was
You're
it
not in
last week?
Kansas
I think
anymore.
not in Kansas anymore. But I was watching the election results come in, and I think I tweeted out 2 minutes before she was announced as the winner, saying that Republicans will never make headway or change the party or grow their party if they don't know how to win in urban cities. And then
Right.
about a minute later, Lily Wu won in Wichita. And I sent that tweet out and said, it looks like the Libertarian Party has figured it out. Why can't Republicans? So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great sign that libertarians have figured out we can flip blue cities that were formerly run by Democrats um, into our column.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know much about that race? Do you have an opinion on probably why she won that race? Or
I don't have too much of it. I don't know much about the race, frankly.
okay, but do you think that libertarians have that opportunity that Republicans are just not getting into the cities and
Well, they
connecting
have
with voters in the
they
cities? So,
have a lot of baggage that they're carrying with them, whereas the libertarians do not have that baggage. So,
That's a great way to
mhm,
put it.
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, like we could be basically be purist with our in representing the ideas that we have and the policies and the way we would undertake so-called governance without the uh, associations, either with some sort of I don't know, all the things that attend to the idea of the Republican Party, and Trumpism as well as part of that. We don't have that kind of baggage to carry around, so we can represent these views, and then they'll be just seen for what they are.
Mhm.
I have kind of a silly question, but I'm very curious on your opinion. The internet is split on this. Founding fathers, libertarian or not?
Definitely, not all of them. I mean, some were more libertarian than others. Uh, the Federalists were much more libertarian in that they wanted to give power to the local at the local level, and they pushed the 10th Amendment and nullification for nullification, and they also got rid of they introduced the Bill of Rights, and as a kind of uh, countermeasure to some of the centralization that the Constitution itself represented. And so I think that not all of them were as libertarian as others, but the spirit of libertarianism ran definitely deep in the founding fathers.
Do you think they take one look at where America is now and pass out or have a heart attack in shock of how far
Well, they would
our
not
federal?
recognize it as the country they founded
Mhm.
because it's a big, giant bureaucratic state, the largest state in human history, with the largest budget ever for a state, and the most uh, uh, interventionist country, probably in history as well, and they wanted nothing to do with foreign entanglements or foreign wars that had nothing to do with the United States directly. And so they would look
Hmm.
at the United States as a pernicious, even evil empire, really, I think.
Yeah, that's always been the one constant in my political lifetime. And I'm not. I've been on the left. I've been on the right. Um, the one thing that I've always been is anti-war.
Me
I,
too.
you know, I've always been anti-war. It's one of the most things that I almost don't negotiate on with a lot of people in terms of we should not be involved in these foreign conflicts. We should not be sending money over there. Certainly be sending our sons and daughters and
Hmm.
military over there to die in countries that have nothing to really do with us.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm of the non-interventionist belief that we should be staying out of these foreign conflicts, but that doesn't seem to be that doesn't seem as popular with current Democrats and Republicans. I mean, we just had 2 nights ago or last week was it with the presidential debate? It was almost like they were arguing over who could be the biggest war hawk,
Yeah.
which to me gives me a pit in my stomach of like, is this the George Bush era again? Is this like 2002, 2003 all over again? This Republican Party? It's just scary to me.
Yeah. Well, it's a uniparty too. It's not just the Republicans. It seems that there's one area that the Democrats and Republicans agree upon, and that is the area of foreign intervention and war. They both seem to be eager, and there's neocons, of course, in both parties, and so that's what ties them together. That's what makes them the uniparty. As Murray Rothbard put it, it's in war that the state really comes into its own. That's where
Hmm.
the state really becomes what it is, and becomes the epitome of statehood or stateism, I should say. Uh,
Hmm.
in that it justifies itself through war too. It uses war as a means of legitimation. That means
Hmm.
to make itself seem absolutely necessary to the citizens who are figured as needing the state's protection against this enemy, when in fact this is an enemy not of the people but of the state. And so, yeah, I've been anti-war since I was 7 years old. As far back as I can remember, when watching the Vietnam War on television, and
Hmm.
not falling for the anti-Soviet propaganda of the Cold War, not falling. And then, of course, when the first Gulf War hit, I was against that, and then, of course, the Iraq War, and even the Afghanistan War. So, and now this one, and of course, Ukraine. So I've been anti-war all my life, even as a leftist. In fact, I was a speaker at the anti-war rally in New York in 2002, or was it 2001? I can't remember. But anyway, it was 2001 where George W. Bush took over. In
Hmm.
February of the year that he took over, I already knew that there would be a war in Iraq. I knew that they were going to bomb Iraq, and then when they
Hmm.
did it, um, I was very vocal about that. I ran an anti-war website, so activist site. So yeah, I've always been anti-war. War is the represents like the first of all, it increases the aggression of the state on its domestic population through taxation and tax aggression, if you will, and it also obviously in the case of the United States, it increases the antipathy for the country in foreign lands, and it actually wrecks our relationships with many places that we could be in good stead with otherwise.
Hmm.
And of course, it's immoral in the sense that it violates the non aggression principle. That is, you should not initiate violence against anyone. You only have the right to act in defense of person and property. And so I believe that all these wars have been have been unjust and violations of the NAP, non-aggression principle. I also believe that we should pull our troops from all 903 bases around the world. We should not be arming and funding Israel's onslaught and devastation of Gaza. We should not be funding Ukraine. We certainly shouldn't fund and arm Taiwan. All of these things should stop.
That actually leads me to my next question. But Phil, do you want to go ahead first?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Since September of this year, nearly 30,000 migrants have been dropped off in San Diego. And in 2022, the DEA seized enough fentanyl to kill every American twice. So open borders are often a libertarian stance. Where do you stand on that personally?
Well, as a candidate and personally, I am not an open borders candidate at all. As a matter of fact, okay, I start from the principle. If we lived in an ideal, which I would conceive of as an ideal society, a perfectly private property society where there was no public or state property, the only way somebody could come on your property is if they were invited to come on. You can't just walk onto somebody's property, walk into somebody's house uninvited and stay there. So I take that principle and apply it to the state. The state, so-called state property, is really the property of the citizens who pay taxes in that state. Likewise, no one should be allowed into the country unless they're invited explicitly. And therefore, anybody that just crosses a border without an invitation is actually violating the non-aggression principle, or the very primary principle of libertarianism. So I am against open borders. I think we should have immigration by invitation only, and that means, say, a person could invite somebody to rent a property or buy a house, or a company could invite somebody to work, and then they'd have to go through the whole naturalization process if they wanted to become citizens. But nobody should be just allowed to cross into a country without an invitation.
By that
There
stance, it
are
almost
open
sounds.
borders candidates in the race. I'm sorry, there is one open borders candidate in the race, and I think it's lunacy. It's creating a humanitarian catastrophe on top of the disaster that it's creating for the country in terms of finances. I mean, we're luring these people in with social welfare and opening the borders and basically inviting them in unmolested. I mean, they're just able to just walk right in and then sign up for effective benefits that some citizens don't get. And it's just an outrage. It's robbery of the
I have a
citizens.
question about that too, but I think Phil had a question. So
Yeah, sorry.
no, that's okay. But I keep
No,
interrupting Phil.
I was just gonna, I was just gonna echo your sentiment, and I think that's one thing that libertarians, people from the outside, kind of look at libertarians and jump to the conclusion, oh, libertarians are open borders. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like more of the Mises caucus have lined up with this position of, if you pretend, if we all just sit here and go, this is private property, this is our country. I mean, the state has public property, which we effectively grant to them through taxes, and that's a whole different issue.
Which they steal
Then
from us, in short.
Which they steal from us. They are only allowed to have this property because by the force of violence or the threat of violence, they take this property. So effectively, as citizens, we own all of this land anyway.
Right.
So we should just be able to say, no, you're not allowed to come into our land, which is our country.
Right.
And by invitation only, that's definitely a little bit stricter on the other side of what people.
Yeah, if I may jump in, let me say this: that not only should they have to be invited, but the person who invites them should be financially and socially and otherwise liable for that person. So if they destroy or kill somebody or rob somebody, it's actually the person who invited them is culpable. And so that even adds more to it. Now, I've been told that this is actually a very liberal policy, because it would allow corporations just to invite people in to work for them. And I said, that's fine as long as they're invited, but as long as that corporation then takes responsibility for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that's more of a privatization of immigration where the corporation is inviting and taking liability for their actions anyway. And if they want to take on the risk of bringing those immigrants
Yeah.
in, that's up to them. And they have to deal with the consequences if it goes south. So,
Yeah.
Camille, you had a question you wanted to.
Yes. Just a moment ago, you said many of these migrants are coming and they're getting better benefits than a lot of our citizens. I've read different numbers, but in California, there's like between 10,000 and 20,000 homeless veterans.
Mhm.
Do you believe that we should be doing more for them? If
Oh,
so,
well,
what?
I mean, what we've done to veterans is an absolute travesty. An absolute travesty. So we've wrecked their lives through PTSD and other illnesses, and mutilated their corpses, and in many cases, just psychologically damaged people and physically. I read an article in the New York Times, which I also don't read much, and in that article they talked about this campaign. I think it was in Yemen, where they were firing cannons at such a rate that these people sustained microscopic brain damage from the ongoing shelling because of the vibrations of their heads, their brains. And these people suffered all kinds of problems. They thought that was PTSD, but it actually was
Mm.
something even more physical, more.
It's like shaken baby syndrome, but for
Yes,
adults.
exactly. So these people, these poor veterans, were like hallucinating and having like really bad panic attacks and severe anxiety. I think that first of all, they shouldn't be used this way in the first place. So, but now that they have been used this way, and that is in these aggressive wars, they should be compensated. Uh, and the state is culpable for that. They should be compensated by the state, and this shouldn't go on any further, so we don't have any further compensation like this. But these people were uh, robbed of their lives, really, robbed of their futures in many cases, and psychologically and physically destroyed in many cases. So there's really there's no sufficient compensation for that. But
Mhm.
nevertheless, they should be compensated, and that means probably housed and fed and given medical services without cost. And I don't mean the Veterans Administration. They should be seen at the best hospitals in the world.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of why I'm so anti-war is because I think, one of my family members came back from World War II. He was only 23 and he lost his leg. He actually had his leg amputated while he was a prisoner of a Nazi war hospital. And to think that the trauma he went through, that he dealt with the rest of his life because of what he saw in World War II and what he had to go through at such a young age, people forget or they're blinded, I guess, or they're just so ignorant of the idea of like there's a human cost to war. And it's
Mhm.
easy to sit on social media and say, let's go send everybody to war. Let's go do this, go
It's
kill the
unbelievable.
bastards. But they don't ever want to see the repercussions or the fallout or who comes back and how they come back. Um, so that's one of the big things that makes me anti-war is just people just forget about veterans once they come back. It seems like they just don't care. They don't think of them as real human beings. So
Yeah, it's terrible.
uh, one thing, kind of a weird pivot now from that, but uh, I want to talk about the economy in California.
Okay.
Um, Simply because the economy, we hear people like Gavin Newsom say California is the fifth largest economy. And they love to tout that. The Democrats in Sacramento always say, oh, it's the fifth largest economy, whether that's true or not. Sometimes it's fifth or eighth or whatever. They always try to say, look, we're the fifth largest because of our incredible policies. That's why we're the fifth largest. And my theory has always been, I think California is fifth largest despite the policies of Democrats. And if we were to truly unleash the the sort of ability and the abundance of California, what we have here,
Mm-hmm.
it could be even higher. It could be a lift for the entire country.
Mm-hmm.
It would be an enormous place of wealth and abundance.
Yes.
Do you have any opinion on sort of the economic policies in California, because they are kind of spreading to the rest of the country? So
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of opinions. I mean, the principal opinion is that when you dedicate money to welfare and homelessness and even drugs and whatever you hold out money for, you actually produce more of what you're trying to mitigate. This is the
mhm,
law of economics. I can't remember the name of this law, but I've been looking for it for 3 weeks actually, but I can't find it. I read it once and I should have saved that file, but I did not. In any case, it's a law of economics that when you pay for something and you put money for something, you're going to get more of that something. You could look at it in terms of the supply curve generally. That is, the more you supply something, the more you're going to have of it. So
mhm,
if you supply more money for any widget, for example, you'll get more widgets produced. If you supply money for welfare and other social programs, you're going to get more of the very problems that you're supposedly trying to mitigate. I don't even believe
mhm,
that that's what they're trying to do. I think they're trying to ingratiate people to the state by virtue of handouts that then make people cripples and dependents, and then they have their loyal subjects then and voters.
mhm,
And this is also the way the state operates on a national level too, and increasing welfare and it holds creates a hostage class of the state. The state has a kind of class in hostage, and these people will show their fealty for the state and even for its warfare policies because they're not going to buck the system at all because they're living off of this and they can't, they've become disabled to live in any other way. So this is the problem. It cripples people. It creates literal cripples, and
mhm,
so California throwing all this money at homelessness. I know they have, like, in San Francisco. I think they spend $850 billion a year on homelessness, and I think New York spends somewhere around 1.2. Uh, uh, well, way less. I don't know exactly the number, but I mean,
mhm,
they spend way less per capita. New York does, not way less in number. I think it's a bigger number, but it's less per capita. And look at San Francisco; it's a total disaster. So the more you,
well,
yeah,
It's
yeah,
clean right
actually,
now.
well, yeah, it's clean right now because President Xi is there and Gavin Newsom. I don't know where he hid all the homeless people. But Camille, actually, it's funny you bring up this because Camille, you sent me an article literally just the other day about this, about homeless nonprofits. And it was, I don't know if I'm quoting it right. It's about the incentive program and the incentive. It's about incentives um, that if you pay to get rid of homeless
mm-hmm.
and you give all these nonprofits all the money, well, if someone's making $500,000 a year as a CEO of a nonprofit that helps homeless,
They're in the
why do
business
you
of
think they
homelessness.
would?
Yes,
Yeah, there's
they're
never
gonna.
going to get rid of homelessness.
They have a disincentive to get rid of homelessness. In
Mhm.
fact,
Hmm.
they need homelessness. The same thing goes for, like, racial issues. If you like in the university, I said this many times. These people that have departments of, like, black studies or this studies and that studies, these people don't have any interest in getting rid of the problem because they actually need the problem to survive, to make money.
Mhm.
The problem is
Hmm.
the source of their income. And so they're not going to mitigate the problem or end it. Certainly, they don't want to end it because then they're out of a job. And that goes for this
Mhm.
issue as well.
Yeah, and in California, to your point about reliance on the state, they have got quite the strategy between you have the nonprofits who are profiting from all this money and the grants that they're getting to solve these social issues like homelessness. And then you have the unions, which are probably the biggest enemy of Californians
Mm-hmm.
going. And they unions pretend at this point that they're for the workers. But when you actually look at the unions here in California, like the California Teachers Association, which is the biggest and most, they
Mm-hmm.
rarely actually care about their members. More, they care about the presidents and the CEO, the people who are running the unions, who
Right.
then take all of your money and donate it to the politician.
And create a monopoly in that industry. Uh-oh.
Did he? We just
He was on a. He must have hit a real profound point there because he
he'll come
froze.
back.
You
Oh,
froze there.
am I back yet?
You're back.
Did I come
You're
back?
back.
You
Okay,
said
sorry.
something so profound that you turned into a statue.
Oh, I broke the internet on it. It was a
Yeah.
good point. I'm sorry I can't say it again. No, I was just saying about the unions in terms of California has gotten it down to a science where when they passed AB 5, they basically got rid of all of the gig economy and contractors, the freedom.
Uh-oh. There he goes again.
He's just never going to get to say this. Speaking of California brownouts, no, I'm just kidding.
Sorry, did I get cut off
Yeah,
again?
you
Yeah, you
did.
froze again. Yeah.
Oh, it's the damn unions. Anyway, I'll get this point out.
They don't want this
The
out.
unions the unions have been trying to take over every single aspect of every part of our economy since.
We're gonna just have to move on from that point.
Okay.
I don't know if it's the point or maybe close some programs. I don't know. Something's eating your bandwidth over there.
Am I back yet?
You're back.
Am I back?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, that was my point about unions. I'll just move on from that point because they don't want to get it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, between the unions and everything else, they want everybody a public worker or a servant to Sacramento in the state.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
and I think people need to realize they're not here to help you. The state wants you to be subservient to them, not to
Right.
have the freedom to do what you want to do. And if California could just get out of that mindset where people start to work and have the freedom and businesses aren't taxed or regulated to death, I mean, I think the opportunities here in California could be absolutely enormous.
It would be a
And
cornucopia, I believe.
it would be the envy of the world, I believe. But right now, we're seeing how the state monopolizes every industry, or they're trying to, and the detrimental effects it has on the people. So that was my point. I was trying to get around to it.
Yeah, it's a good point. That's actually 100% right.
So what would, like, I know you're running for president, but let's
Mhm.
say you were to become governor of California tomorrow. What would be something you would tackle right away?
Well, first of all, I'd get all the money out of. I'd take all the. Uh, I'd tackle the education system first, and turn it private altogether. Get rid of
Mm.
Nice.
state funding for it altogether. I would get rid of all the welfare programs, but you have to ramp that down slightly. I mean, you can't simply. Well, the people are already out in the street, but I would ramp down very rapidly the social welfare programs that are being put in place. Certainly, I would stop uh, uh, the uh, the bills that are floated about reparations. That would be off the table 100%. San Francisco's got a crazy reparations bill that they're floating. I don't know what's happened with it lately, but it's obscene.
Mm.
It's basically the idea that if you're white, you have to be punished for what people did. In fact, in other states, not in California. And I would deregulate as much as you can within a state, all these industries, and I would what else would I do? That's pretty much. I would cut the budget by like 75%. Frankly, the state budget.
Played a game when Angela McCardle was on the last time, and we actually went through all the like executive agencies under the governor, and we went through like line by line, and I think she ended up, if she was governor, I think she ended up cutting like 75% of the agencies that we went through. We were like, cut or no cut, cut, just by name alone.
Yeah, I would do a Javier Milei on California big time. Cutting, just rip these agencies out and just abolish them straight up, and
just to start all over.
Yeah, I mean, it would the state needs like the bandages ripped off, because this is a mess. And it will not heal until they get these until the state interventionism is gone. And people don't realize that actual real social welfare increases dramatically when the state is out of the business of social welfare, because the state is nothing but a parasite. The state is effectively a parasite that lives off the capital of any society. It is a capital sucking. It's a I'm sounding like Ross Perot here. A giant sucking sound I'm hearing. Yeah, it's a total parasite, and it just lives off the capital, and therefore depletes the capital base and decreases wealth and increases misery. And so the state is the enemy. And as a governor, I would dismantle it as fast as I could.
It's too bad
I tweeted today that America needs like an elimination diet with our politicians. Just get rid of all of them, and then slowly add in a few. And then if they're not working, okay, get rid of those, add it. Okay. Just like, just keep asking what's not working, what's making us sick, and only keep the ones that are really effective.
Exactly. I think a subtractive or eliminationist is the idea. Eliminationism and subtraction instead of adding things, which brings me to RFK Jr., which is like he's got these ideas of just adding this, adding that, more regulatory commissions. And, he thinks that the problem is regulatory capture, but the only way you get rid of regulatory capture is by getting rid of regulators, period. It's not by, trying to extricate the corporate money out of it, because whenever there's something to be captured, it'll be captured. So get rid of the capturable entities, and therefore you get rid of the capture. I don't know why people can't understand this. People like him, or leftist progressives in general, they just don't get it.
Yeah, call me crazy, but I don't usually trust when a politician says, I want to solve government issues with more government, because that to me doesn't, it seems like that's the wrong way to go about it. I know you got
sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say, Nikki Haley, I don't know if you saw that clip today of her saying she wants to require everybody on social media. I mean, I guess war with Iran wasn't enough. Now she wants to go to war with everybody on social media.
Spraying all those heels.
Yes, I did. I tweeted something. I quote tweeted it. Yeah. She wants basically to have a registry, in effect, of everybody that's on social media. They have to be in under their own real name, and all this. This is just unbelievable. I mean, she is a total authoritarian, totalitarian nutcase. And the fact that they're giving her all this airtime on all these networks is just beyond belief. I mean, and then she must have had 50 tweets supportive of Israel today. So Candace Owens said, she should run. I think I support her for president of Israel.
I mean, my theory is, and we're kind of getting off topic from California, but that's okay.
California is everything, though.
California is everything. Whatever happens here comes to your state eventually. Well, Nikki Haley to me, and this is the impression I'm getting, is that she's the candidate that's going to play nice with the Beltway, with the establishments, with the donor base, with Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and Boeing, and she'll play nice with the military industrial complex, and she'll play nice with the media. Like that's it seems like they're almost trying to shove this early 2000 establishment GOP
Hmm.
back down people's throats, and I think she's
Exactly.
probably the personification of it in my mind.
Yeah, and they prepared the way for it with the way they were managed to roll all of the so-called anti-war, anti-establishment Republicans back into the fold vis-a-vis
Mhm.
this Israeli conflict. They got them
Mhm.
all back into the fold. Now they're all rah rah war war. You know, these were the people that were saying no aid or funds to Ukraine. These were the people that were
Exactly.
saying the Iraq war was a mistake. It was a terrible travesty. These are the people that were saying get the state off of our backs. They're now all together in it. It's unbelievable. It's like these people. Where are they? They must have been. They're just team players, so they don't really see uh they don't see anything from a principled position standpoint.
Yeah, it seems like it's wherever their next paycheck or board seat is going to be. That's like
Yeah,
Chris Christie. He's not going to be president, but where will he be sitting on the board next? Which war company will he be sitting on the board next?
I think it's going to
Um,
be what is that company that makes Twinkies? I think it's going to be that company.
Hostess. Yeah, he
Hostess.
might be on
Hostess.
the board of that. Yeah, he could be on the board of Hostess.
Or maybe Blimpy.
Um,
I don't know, Blimpy.
Blimpy. Um, so we have a couple minutes left before the hour. I want to thank you again for coming on.
My pleasure.
We tried to touch on everything. There's some essays of yours that I had read that I want to talk about, but maybe we can
Yeah.
talk about them another time.
Hmm.
Um, in the final couple minutes, if you had anything to kind of let people know more about you, I guess sort of if your summation of your candidacy and where people can find you.
Sure. So, my campaign slogan says it all: wreck the regime. That's REC, the regime. And by the regime, I'm talking about the state, of course, but also all of its appendages, the corporations, big pharma, big tech, the military-industrial complex, the Fed, that is the Federal Reserve, and so forth. So wrecking the regime means dismantling this whole configuration, and so we're doing it through localization and through liberty education. The way to reach the campaign is at wrecktheregime.com. If you want to know more about me, you can go to michaelrectenwald.com, where I keep everything, a record of all my writing and uh, all my essays and appearances and um, media citations and all that. Um, I've been at this for the liberty fight for about 8 years now. And I, uh, I'm really, I think I'm the only anti-war candidate in the race. I mean, there are others in the Libertarian Party, but I think I'm the most strident and strenuous anti-war candidate that's making that one of the main planks. So if you're looking for an anti-war solution or an anti-war candidate you can get behind that's not going to sell out or equivocate, then that's me. But it's not wrecking the regime. It's not me doing this. It's all of us undertaking this together.
Great. Yeah, and I highly recommend to any of our followers or listeners, go check out michaelrectenwald.com. Those essays that I brought up are great. I was kind of binging on them in the past couple days, and I just went down the rabbit hole. I've been enjoying them, and I'll continue to read them. And if you want to learn more about Michael and his campaign, go to rectorregime.com. So thank you, Michael, for coming on. And if you ever want to come back on, let us know next year or whenever.
My
Open
pleasure.
invitation.
Thank you so much. I
So
appreciate that.
maybe we can talk more about you possibly being governor of California. That might not be a bad idea.
I
You're
thought, I
sitting there
think if I
going,
lose
More
this, that's the
climate.
default position they give me. I thought that's what they told me. I don't
That
know.
is not
yeah.
that's
I
a
mean, I
second
would
place.
take it
Yeah.
based on our conversation tonight. I'd be all for Michael Rectenwald for governor of California.
Okay.
But yeah, thank you for coming on. And to finish out the show, as we always do, if you like our show, make sure you subscribe, like, share, review, all that stuff. Comment helps with the algorithm. The best thing you can do to support the show that is absolutely free, share it with somebody who would enjoy this. So with that, tell you all good night. Later, everybody.